So I have this Facebook friend whose life seems perfect. She's always posting things about how blessed she is and how grateful she is for the life that she has. And I get the feeling she's not just saying those things for the sake of Facebook, but she really means it. And she and her family always go on all these exciting adventures together. And no matter where they go or what they do, it's as if they've taken a professional photographer along with them, because the whole family just looks perfect. How many of you have a friend kind of like that? And how many of you kind of don't like that person sometimes? We all do this, right? It's hard not to do. But that way of thinking costs us something. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is what our bad habits cost us. Maybe you scroll through your Facebook feed and you roll your eyes and you think, it's just 5 seconds of my time. How could it be hurting me? Well, researchers have found that envying your friends on Facebook actually leads to depression. And that's just one of the traps that our minds can set for us. Have you ever complained about your boss? Or looked at your friends' lives and thought, why do they have all the luck? Those things seem small in the moment. In fact, they might even make you feel better in the moment. But the truth is, they're slowly eating away at your mental strength. There's 3 kinds of destructive beliefs that make us less effective and rob us of our mental strength. The first one is unhealthy beliefs about ourselves. We feel sorry for ourselves. And just to be clear, it's okay to be sad when something bad happens, but self-pity goes beyond that. It's about exaggerating your misfortune. It's when you start to think things like, I shouldn't have to deal with this, or nobody else is suffering like I am. The second type of unhealthy belief that holds us back is unhealthy beliefs about other people. We think that other people can control us, and we give away our power. But as adults living in a free country, there's very few things that you actually have to do. So when you say, I have to work late, you give away your power. Yeah, maybe there'll be consequences if you don't work late. Still, unhealthy beliefs about other people come about because we give away our power. And when you say things like, my mother-in-law drives me crazy, you give away your power. Maybe she's not the nicest person on earth, but it's up to you how you respond to her because you're in control. The third type of destructive belief that holds us back is unhealthy beliefs about the world. Sometimes we feel like the world owes us something. We think if I put in enough hard work, then I deserve success. But expecting success to fall into your lap like some sort of cosmic reward will only lead to disappointment. I know once you've established those unhealthy beliefs, it's hard to let go of them. But you can't afford not to break your bad mental habits, because sooner or later, you're going to hit a time in your life where you need all the mental strength that you can muster. When I was 23 years old, I thought I had life all figured out. I graduated from grad school. I landed my first big job as a therapist. I got married, and I bought a house. And I thought, this is going to be great. I've got this incredible jump start on life. What could go wrong? Well, that all changed for me one day when I got a phone call from my sister. She said that our mother was found unresponsive, and she'd been rushed to the hospital. So my husband Lincoln and I jumped in the car, and we raced to the hospital. We couldn't imagine what could possibly be wrong. She was only 51. She didn't have any history of health problems. When we got to the hospital, the doctors explained to us that she'd had a brain aneurysm. And within 24 hours, my mother, who used to wake up in the morning saying, it's a great day to be alive, passed away. That news was devastating to me. My mother and I had been very close. And as a therapist, I knew on an intellectual level how to get through my grief, but knowing it and doing it are 2 very different things. I made a lot of mistakes that really slowed down my healing process. But then on the 3-year anniversary of my mother's death, some friends called and invited Lincoln and me to a basketball game. Coincidentally, it was being played at the same auditorium where I'd last seen my mother on the night before she passed away. I hadn't been back there since, and I wasn't even sure I wanted to go back. But Lincoln and I talked about it, and ultimately we decided maybe that would be a good way to honor her memory. So we went to the game, and we actually had a really good time with our friends. And on the drive home that night, Lincoln and I talked about how great it was to finally be able to go back to that place and to be able to talk about my mom and remember her with a smile rather than all those feelings of sadness. But shortly after we got home that night, Lincoln said he didn't feel well. A few minutes later, he collapsed. I had to call for an ambulance. His family met me at the emergency room, and we waited for what seemed like forever in the waiting room, till finally a doctor came out, and he invited us to a back room. I knew what happens when doctors want to speak to you privately. They don't tell you good news. Sure enough, he sat us down, and he told us that Lincoln, who was the most adventurous person I'd ever met, was gone. He'd had a heart attack. He was only 26, and he didn't have any history of heart problems. So now I found myself a 26-year-old widow, and I didn't have my mom. And I thought, how am I going to get through this? It was by far the most painful period of my life. And it was during that time that I figured out sometimes, it doesn't matter how small your bad habits might seem, they'll hold you back. I worked really hard to get through my grief, and throughout it all, I always held out hope that someday life could get better. And eventually it did. A few years later, I met Steve, and I fell in love again. We got married, we sold the house that Lincoln and I had lived in, and we bought a new house in a new area, and I got a new job. And I thought, okay, this is my fresh start in life. But almost as quickly as I breathed that sigh of relief, Steve's dad got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I found myself starting to think things like, I shouldn't have to deal with this. Why do I always have to lose all my loved ones? This isn't fair. But if I'd learned anything throughout my grief, it was that that way of thinking could hold me back. So I sat down and I wrote a list of all the things mentally strong people don't do. It's a combination of the things that I'd learned from my personal journey, but it was also the things I saw in my therapy office. Sometimes when people overcame adversity, it wasn't always about what they did, it was more about what they didn't do. I was glad that I had that list, and I kept reading it over. Within a few weeks of writing it, Steve's dad passed away. My journey taught me that sometimes, no matter how small your bad habits seem, if you keep doing them right alongside your good habits, you become like this hamster in a wheel who doesn't get anywhere. You have to let go of those bad habits that are holding you back if you really want to move forward towards your greatest potential. So how do you give up your bad mental habits? It starts by countering those unhealthy beliefs that I talked about with healthier ones. For example, the unhealthy beliefs about ourselves, they mostly come about because we're uncomfortable with our feelings. Feeling sad or hurt or angry or lonely, those things are all uncomfortable. So we do anything we can to escape it, like feel sorry for ourselves. But that's really only a temporary distraction that does nothing for our long-term pain. The only way to get through uncomfortable feelings is to just get through them, to let yourself feel sad, and then to move on. Unhealthy beliefs about others come about because we compare ourselves to other people. We think that they're either above us or below us, or we think that they can control how we feel or that we can control how they behave, or we blame them for holding us back. But really, it's our own choices that do that. You have to see that you're your own person and other people are separate from you. If they succeed, maybe they can help you succeed, but if they fail or behave badly, it doesn't have to affect you unless you let it. And unhealthy beliefs about the world come about because deep down, we wish that life were fair. We think if I put in enough good deeds in life, then I should have plenty of good things happen to me. But ultimately, you have to accept that life isn't fair. And that can be liberating. Yeah, it means that you won't necessarily be rewarded for your good deeds, but it means that no matter how much you've suffered, you're not doomed to keep suffering. Life doesn't work that way. In fact, Your world is what you make it. But of course, before you can change your world, you have to believe that you can change it. I once worked with this man who had been diabetic for years. His doctor referred him for therapy because his bad mental habits were starting to affect his physical health. See, his mother had died from complications of diabetes at a really young age, and so he just believed he was doomed, and he'd given up taking care of his blood sugar altogether. In fact, most recently, he was starting to lose his eyesight because his blood sugar had gotten so high. And even though he knew all the things he could do to take care of himself, his bad mental habits just kept him from taking any action. But eventually, he agreed to make one small change. He said, I'll give up my 2-liter-a-day Pepsi habit, and I'll trade it in for Diet Pepsi. He made sure to come in every week and tell me how terrible the Diet Pepsi tasted, but he stuck with it. And he couldn't believe how quickly his numbers started to improve. And when he saw a little bit of improvement, he said, okay, let's talk about some other things. And he said, maybe I'll give up my nightly bowl of ice cream, and I'll trade it in for a snack that has a little bit less sugar in it. And then one day he was out shopping with some friends at a thrift store, and he found this beat-up old exercise bike. And he bought it for a couple of bucks, and he parked it in front of his TV, and he'd pedal while he watched some of his favorite shows. And eventually he noticed he could see the TV just a little bit more clearly than he had before. And he set a new goal for himself, that he wanted to improve his vision enough that he could get his driver's license back. And from that day forward, he was on fire. He wanted to do everything he could to improve his life. And by the end of our time together, he was coming in saying, okay, what are we going to do this week? Because he finally believed that he had the strength to change his life and that he could change his world. And it all started with just one small step. So I ask you to consider, what bad mental habits are holding you back? What unhealthy beliefs do you need to let go of so that you can move forward towards your greatest potential? What's one small step that you could take today, right here, right now? Thank you.